I'm heading down west on Madison Street, in the center of Chicago, or somewhat center. Madison divides north and south in Chicago. And State Street divides east and west. But people always say that they're from the west side because that literally means anything west of State Street, right? But anyway, I started driving west in the loop of downtown Chicago. I cut out part of the beginning of the video that had music playing. But the first red light that's hit, the first 8 mile is Halsted after State Street, which State Street is 0 and Halsted is 800 west. And up ahead here is a L train loop. There's part of the train where you could pick up a lot of different trains that loop around the downtown area and then head back out towards different outer parts of the city. Some of these trains are dangerous, like the Red Line particularly. I haven't actually witnessed any of it. I've been on them in the past, but people have gotten into trouble on the Red Line, and maybe other trains as well, because a lot of parts of Chicago are more dangerous now than they ever been. And they call this area of downtown the Loop because of these trains that go around Chicago. The Red Line goes southeast. I think the Pink Line goes west, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't remember all the colors. I haven't driven the train in a while. But I believe that river that we crossed is where it separates the neighborhoods, where people call it West Loop. I don't think they don't call the neighborhood West Loop right outside of the train, but rather I believe it's right after the river, if I'm not mistaken. The West Loop used to be some kind of industrial area like 100 years ago or more. I think maybe even to the 1850s. There was a bunch of industrial areas, places there. And now it's a place where men with tight pants and beautiful women go to eat small portions of food for a lot of money. And where they might pay $2,000 or $3,000 for rent, I don't know. Who would want to pay $7,000 or $8,000 for rent, or even $2,000 or $3,000? $3,000 a month to fucking rent a place. But these people keep a smile on their face. They do. Like little kids that participate in some bad doings, right? They keep a smile on their face, even though you know it's a fake smile. They push their lips up, and they say everything's all right, and it's nice, and they like it. But even though they know it's wrong, but the West Loop always has people walking around, going from one place to another. I don't know where they're all going. There's always people out in the streets there, delivering something or picking up some food. There's lots of restaurants, coffee houses, and I guess wine bars. And everywhere in the city you have to pay to park, pay a lot of money for food and drink. But they could buy their food from the Whole Foods market on Madison and Halsted. As you've seen, there was a Whole Foods there. So they're not stuck to eating at restaurants all the time. They go walk to their supermarket on the corner of Halsted and Madison. A lot of those people don't even drive. They take the train everywhere, train or Uber or something like that, because it costs too much money to have a car in Chicago, and at least in the Loop, right? As you can see, everybody lives in this fucking place, like cramped up into these little expensive apartments, where restaurants and bars and nightlife is right outside your front door. Your front door isn't very far from your couch because your fucking apartment is so small. But you'll get to see Julie in the elevator. She'll be with a bunch of her half-dressed friends. And they'll all be smiling. And hopefully going to the same place you're going. But a lot of these people work from home. And a lot of them take the bus or train to their job downtown in a loop. But not everybody that lives in this area works in the loop. And not everybody that works in the loop lives downtown. But I bet you're thinking right now how you could get yourself a job downtown and live in the loop or the West Loop area, right? And experience the nightlife. And Julie on the elevator. Who wants to experience Julie? You can go to the deli together. There's a deli up the street on the right. I remember talking to some painter that said he was from New York, and he said that there was delis all over New York City. Like every block has a deli. And he says in Chicago, he says they're non-existent. But there's one here on the right coming up. Or did we pass it already? I don't remember. I don't know if Subway could be considered a deli. But if it is, we probably passed up a couple of those already in the locations or near. But there's some sandwich shops. If someone lives in a loop and they want to save money, the best thing to do is get out of the West Loop area. Because it's expensive. But then again, I knew a girl that was living, I think, in Bronzeville, which is southeast, and she was paying like $1,800 a month for rent there as well, which the area a couple hundred years ago was like really, or 150 years ago was a really nice area, and has really old Chicago architecture. Unlike a lot of the buildings you see here are newer buildings. They weren't built in 1905, not in the state that they're in now at least. Some of them yes, but some no. One of my great-grandparents lived on 600 West Madison Street. And of course those buildings aren't there anymore. Now they have like an 8 or 9 floor building there, but I assume back in the early 1900s it was just like a wooden shack that got knocked down so they could build these bigger buildings. But a lot of Madison Street was dirt road in the 1920s. And so what you'd be seeing here on the screen would be a bunch of dirt with horses and buggies pulling people around, and then some other people on foot walking through horse shit that's everywhere because there was hundreds of horses through on the street, and 3 or 4 story buildings. But at the time, around the turn of the century, the 19th to 20th century, there was the Sands, which was near the Chicago Tribune building, which had a bunch of gambling and taverns and prostitution in the area, which was kind of a rough area at the time because when you have that kind of stuff, you have a bunch of crime, you know. But now they have a more civil nightlife here in the area for people that pay $2,000 or more for rent a month. And up here is the United Center where the Bulls play on Wood Street in Madison. And if you're traveling through the area any particular night, you want to avoid this area because the traffic's terrible when there's a game or a concert or whatever. I saw Pearl Jam there at the United Center 25 years ago. back when that music was still cool. And 25, 30 years ago and prior, a lot of Madison Street was a pretty rough area. It was a lot of drugs, prostitution, gangs, and stuff like that. Like walking around the streets, where it wouldn't be a place where you'd want to be walking at nighttime. But nowadays, it's a lot different now because gentrification's coming to the area. There was a lot of boarded up businesses and so on and so forth. And it just happened, that's just the way the area turned out to be. But I remember a story my dad told me when Martin Luther King assassination happened. There was some kind of riot that happened in the area, and young black youths, or maybe not young, but like everybody was just rioting in the area, and they burned down Madison Street. So a lot of Madison Street was burned down. Businesses were destroyed and looted. Sound familiar? But back then, a couple thousand people were arrested. A handful of people died. A bunch of police were injured. And it was throughout several neighborhoods where the rioting happened in Chicago, and I think in other cities as well, like Los Angeles and New York and stuff like that. But my dad said that wherever he was in the city, if he seen black youths on the street, they had to do something with their headlights. I don't remember exactly what. And if you didn't have your headlights on or off or something like that, then they would throw bricks or bottles at your car when you drive by. But I don't remember exactly what he had to do. He told me he did something. There was something of the sort to make sure you were safe driving through certain neighborhoods, or if you've seen certain people on the street corners. But yeah, in 1968, there was a riot. I think there's a name for it. I don't remember the name. And most of Madison Street was burned down and destroyed for at least 3 or 4 miles, if I'm not mistaken. But you will see driving through the down Madison Street, you'll see some of the businesses boarded up still, and spray paint on the walls and people walking the streets. I don't think that's a direct result to those riots of 1968, since those were 50 years ago or something like that. A lot of the people that live in the area are descendants of those people that were rioting on Madison Street and throughout the Chicago neighborhoods in 1968, destroying Madison Street at the time. But in the early 1900s, I think Madison Street and southwards, some of my European family lived in the area. A lot of Lithuanians, Jewish people, Polish people lived in the area. Even my Mexican great-grandfather lived a couple miles south. And then there was a thing called the White Flight, and black families moved in, then white families moved out. But people say that because of the riots and the looting and the fires that the people put on their neighborhood, that the neighborhood never really recovered or never looked good again as it did years prior to the riots. But nowadays, gentrification is slowly creeping into the area, like a green cloud of dollar bills raining down on your apartment buildings, setting your rent at $1,800 a month for rent, fucking bitches. And the stupid current mayor raising the taxes and making food so fucking expensive to where people are buying books on how to eat fucking from the land. Did you know there's 5 times more vitamin C in white pine needles tea than there is of citrus fruit. Yeah, Whole Foods. I can find a white pine tree anywhere, bitch. And up here on the right, after Kedzie, is the Martin Luther King Apartments. Martin Luther King Jr. Plaza Apartments. They're where some white women live, of course. Mostly black families. And of course the white women will say, "Oh, it's so beautiful. Everybody's so kind to me." Stuff like that. Where the reality of it, well, people will say that, they ask the association, the apartment association, or whoever's in control to fix something, and stuff never gets fixed there, I guess. And people are weird, and so on and so forth. But you never know until you move there. Why don't you move there? Check it out. And these apartments have different size apartments, where I guess a 4-bedroom could cost over $2,000, $2,000 or $3,000 for an apartment at this place, where the cheapest one could be like $800, and a 1-bedroom would cost about $1,400. Don't they say that it's a rule of thumb to whatever you make, your rent should cost about 30% of what you make a month? So that would mean that you would have to make like $4,400 a month to pay $1,400. So a person would have to bring home $1,100 a week. Who the fuck takes home $1,100 in that neighborhood? You would have to make like $35 an hour or something like that. Or 2 people making $18 an hour, right? But a high school kid that just got out of high school, that's working at McDonald's, what do they make? $14 an hour? I'm not sure. All right, I think the minimum wage in Chicago in 2025 is $15 an hour. But if you just got out of high school and you have no career and no experience, then you're making $15 an hour, which means that you probably can't get an apartment right out of high school. But if you go back 60 or 70 years in history, it was easy for people to get a job at a factory and then get an apartment. Where did Chicago go wrong, huh? In the early 1900s, you can get an apartment for $20 or $30 a month, but you're only making a few $100s a month, if that. It is still early in Chicago. It's around 12 o'clock, and that's why there's not a lot of people outside yet. And it's about 25 degrees, which is typical for January weather, 25 degrees. The humidity level's at 45%, which is, or I think it was 47%, which my apartment is 45%. So maybe that's why the cold doesn't feel so bad, even though it's a few degrees below freezing, the freezing level of 32. So not a lot of people are going out yet because it's still early and it's cold. There's not too much wind today. So they call Chicago the Windy City because the politicians talk a lot of shit. There's not a lot of wind. I don't think there's any more wind in Chicago than anywhere else. Maybe slightly, but nothing noticeable. It's not like you have to fight the wind when you come to Chicago. And the wind makes things colder, makes it colder outside, and there's not too much wind. So 25 degrees isn't too cold. As you can see, people are outside casually walking in 25-degree weather. There was snow on the ground this morning, but the sun melted most of it. It only snowed a couple times this year so far. Well, maybe not this year, but because this year just started. But the cold season, it snowed twice, I believe. At least twice. And the last couple weeks of fall, this past fall, the autumn weather was really cold, like February winter weather. It's like at nighttime it got to around 0 degrees outside. But when it's sunny out and there's no wind and the humidity levels are at a good point, then it's not too cold. It's not terrible. It's not like I gotta hurry up and get back in the car or in the house, right? People are just casually walking around, hanging out. Come springtime or summertime, there's gonna be a lot more people outside around 5 o'clock at night. This place is usually always happening, right? If you come in the early morning, you're only gonna see a few people, or the early afternoon like I am now in the video. As you can see, there's a bunch of businesses and people outside. There's a lot of places to go and things to do in this area for the people that live in the area. And every now and then you get to see a certain individual just standing in the street, on the side of the street, doing something strange, and you wonder what they're doing, but you just keep going and you forget. This area, back in the early years of Chicago, this area was called Central Park. Now it's called Garfield Park. Garfield Park was named after the President Garfield, James Garfield, who was assassinated in 1881, I believe. James Garfield was the 20th President of the United States until he was assassinated. The crime rates in Garfield Park are 338% higher than the national average. That's 338% higher than the national average. Both violent and property crimes are everywhere in this area. There's drugs, there's gangs, there's prostitution, there's thieves, probably carjacking. Although I knew a lot of people from this area that lived in Garfield Park, and they weren't bad people. So not everybody in the area is like some kind of criminal or anything like that. It's mostly the young people, but not exclusively, right? And I don't know why they made an East and a West Garfield, which are separate neighborhoods. And both areas share the same park, which is Garfield Park, which is on the western portion of East Garfield Park. But like I said, back in the early days, up until maybe the 1950s, 1960s, if I'm not mistaken, there was a lot of Jewish people, Russians, Polish, Lithuanian, German, Irish people living in the area until white flight happened. And some people blame the state of the neighborhood in decline due to the riots that happened in the 60s, in the late 60s. But like I said, gentrification is creeping on in. And those cool people that I know that live in the area are all for it, are just waiting for it to hit their block. But they're not waiting for the fucking rent prices that these bitches have in Chicago. But currently we're going through the Austin neighborhood in Chicago on Madison Street. It is the last Chicago neighborhood going westbound on Madison Street before hitting, I believe, Oak Park neighborhood or city, the suburb of Oak Park. See, even though Chicago was built on a grid system of a bunch of squares put up to each other with angle streets going through, which the angle streets were old Indian trails, like I mentioned before. Chicago's, got a shape to it, and inside that particular shape there's a bunch of squares which make up blocks and miles, and the Austin neighborhood is pretty dangerous. It has high crime rate. It ranks 5th out of 100 Chicago community areas for quality of life crimes, which include loitering, vagrancy, and unruly conduct. But I heard that East Austin is more dangerous than the other side of Austin. That's just what I heard. Because Oak Park is bordering the Austin neighborhood at the corner at the corner of Austin and Madison Street. But according to Fox 32 in Chicago, Austin is ranked number 7 as one of the worst or most dangerous neighborhoods in Chicago. They say it's one of the worst neighborhoods in terms of crime, according to Property Club, and that the neighborhood ranked 9th in violent crime and 20th in property crime in Chicago. But Austin borders Oak Park at Austin Boulevard. So there's a lot of gang violence in this neighborhood. It's like 70% black, 20% Mexican or Latin. There's a small portion of white people that live there. And not everybody in the area participates in crime, and not everybody in the area is affected by the crime. As you can see, I'm driving through the area, but I wouldn't want to hang out there. Not today, at least. In the 1920s, Austin was one of Chicago's best-served commuter areas with street railroad cars. Madison Street in Austin was a pretty busy area at the time. And a lot of Italians and Irish people used to live here, with Germans and other European types. But like Garfield Park, Austin seen a demographic change coming in the 1960s until the 1980s. The whole area was mostly of African American people or black people. I don't know if they were directly born from Africa. So Italians and Irish moved out, and black residents moved in, and now Mexican people are moving into the area. But now we're here in the Oak Park neighborhood. Maybe it's a village Oak Park, Illinois. Oak Park has changed a lot over the years to what it looks like now. But there's a lot of restaurants there, and there's kind of always had been good food in the area, and high rent prices and nice architecture in the area. There's a good side and there's a bad side to Oak Park. Well, there's a dangerous side. Well, it used to be. I don't know if it's as dangerous now as it used to be. But like I said, gentrification is kind of creeping in, raising the rent prices and calming things down. Which I think there was some guy that shot an officer in Oak Park just a few months ago, in end of 2024, maybe October or November, I don't remember exactly. So there is crime in the area. But I think it's Lake Street, just east of Harlem is a nice area to go get some food and see some cool architecture. Like I said, there's areas that are rough that are surrounded by the $3,000 a month rent price people. And those people outside of those apartments do commit the crime, and it's not likely that you'll be witnessing any of that. But it is possible, but not very likely, because Oak Park is generally a decent neighborhood. And like I said, the rough area is, I think, not as rough as it used to be. There's an old movie theater there. I don't know if it's open anymore, on Lake Street. And then there used to be this Italian joint that you couldn't sit in there, but you could order like quick made Italian food from the counter. And I generally do not like taco places, but there's a good taco joint on Lake Street in Oak Park. And I think before COVID there was a huge nightlife in Oak Park, and I haven't really witnessed it that often driving through. I think a lot of people are still at home with their masks on. You can see them driving their cars sometimes by themselves with masks on, so they don't infect themselves from themselves. And Lake Street in Chicago is, I think, 300 north of Madison Street, which might be different in Oak Park, but not by much, I don't think. So from Madison Street, you would have to go north 3 blocks to Lake Street. And the village of Forest Park begins somewhere around here. I'm not exactly sure what streets Forest Park borders Oak Park. And Forest Park, I kind of try to stay away from, because I don't know. It seems like a nicer neighborhood, but the people are bad drivers. And just a few months ago, in late 2024, like 4 people were shot at the train station. So there are gangs in this area as well. But gang shootings don't usually affect non-gang members, but sometimes they do. And sometimes it's the people of the neighborhood or somebody that's visiting from off the train, because somewhere in Forest Park on the train, people were robbed at gunpoint in Forest Park. But it's not all gun violence, you know. There was an incident in December in Forest Park where a man and a woman were fighting, and they were dating, I guess, and they had some kind of argument, and the man pulled the braids out of the woman's hair and threw the braids on the floor, and then I guess the man started biting the woman or something, and she had blood on her hands when the police arrived. So they were biting and pulling hair out of each other. So we have a teeth problem in Chicago or Forest Park. A teeth assault, a biting assault. And in the same month, there was another guy that lived with a girl, or was dating a girl, and he went there with another girl to have a threesome. And his girlfriend didn't want to have a threesome with the guy and the girl. And so the guy ended up somehow punching his girlfriend in the face and pepper spraying her. And so it's not all gun violence in this neighborhood. There's also pepper spray and biting. But generally, this is a nice area. Just a lot of cool shops and cool places to go. It's a nice looking area, nice architecture, where rent could be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000. And maybe more. Some guy just rear-ended me. I had to stop for a woman that was at a crosswalk that doesn't have a stop sign, but like it shows that there's a sign that says stop for pedestrians, and there was a pedestrian woman. It looked like she was going to walk without looking. And so I stopped, and a guy from behind me that was smoking a cigar didn't notice that I was going to stop, and he rear-ended me. Now I got to go to the fucking mechanic and get my car fixed. Bitch ass. He told me not to call the police because we could take care of it on our own. And I guess he was right, because now our insurance is going to go up. Fuck insurance. But anyways, now I got to get my car fixed through the insurance company. The guy also said that the police wouldn't be there anytime soon. They wouldn't be able to come because they're too busy. But the fucking cops came within 1 minute of me calling them. And I sat in my car for about 5 minutes while they did the report, and I was out. That was it. A nice end to the fucking perfect fucking day, huh? So yeah, there's bad drivers everywhere. But Forest Park and Berwyn, I try to avoid because the fucking people in those neighborhoods drive like fucking assholes. They're fucking idiots. I don't know where the fuck they learn how to drive. But I've only been in one other accident in the last 20 years. And it was in this area. And it's because I saw this one Mexican girl just like fly past me and blow a stop sign. And she almost fucking hit me. It was insane. And she stared at me as she fucking zoomed past me. Like, what you gonna do, motherfucker? Crazy Mexican girls. But anyways. Yeah, there's a lot of crazy drivers in this area. And I want to avoid these areas with my car anytime I can. Because it's just the way it is. Notorious. I don't know what the statistics are, but I see with my own fucking eyes. So some fucking old white dude with a cigar in his mouth fucking hit me in the back. It's just a fucking neighborhood. And why has it got to be white?